Hello and welcome to Rights and Recourse, a program that tackles constitutional, human rights and legal issues, bringing you information and analysis. My name is Dumila Matez. Remember, you can also be part of our discussion today by calling our studio line on 011 714 5497 or 5498 or tweeting us at Rights and Recourse. Alternatively, you can email your thoughts to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. Parole can be described as a period whereby an offender who has served the prescribed minimum detention period of his or her sentence in a correctional facilities is conditionally released to serve the remaining sentence in the community under the supervision and control of the Department of Correctional Services. Parole placement is subject to certain conditions, that is, until the expiry of the full sentence being accepted prior to release. Today on Rights and Recourse, we are dealing with a parole of a different kind, that of Pan-Africanist Congress member of Azania, Kenny Mutsamai, was arrested and charged and sentenced for armed robbery, murder, illegal possession of a firearm, illegal possession of ammunition. For this, he was sentenced to 2 life sentences and plus 19 years. During his trial, Mutsamai refused to cooperate as in his words, he did not recognize the court and apartheid system. Early this month, he was released on parole, refusing day parole offered to him last year. But first, let's take a look at this insert.
So we'll see, how old were you when your father was sentenced, and how has the whole thing affected you as the family?
I think I was 2 years that time, because when he was arrested, my mother was pregnant. It affected because, sometimes other children, they have their fathers in their side, but I didn't have my father and my brother. He was suffering too much. People were talking too much about maybe why he did kill the police officer. He's feeling guilty, and yeah.
As the family, you hold the view that the government has failed you. We just want to find out, why do you think that the government has failed you?
We have written letters to the presidential office. We needed answers why the political prisoners were not released that time. So we didn't get answers. We tried to call to the president's office, and they said he's busy, he's out of the country. They didn't even come back to us.
You were unhappy about your father's parole conditions. We just want to find out, now that he has been granted the full parole with the normal parole conditions, how do you guys feel? We're
happy, but at the other side, we're not happy because he's still having this bracelet, this tracker. Like, maybe we're sitting outside, just like yesterday we were outside. Then it was ringing, then it says he's violating his parole, but he's here. Now we're trying to know him better, step by step.
Our producer, Sandile Sangad, is speaking there to Kenny Mutsamai's daughter, Busi. To discuss today's topic, we are joined by Mr. James Smallberger, Chief Deputy Commissioner for the Incarceration and Corrections from the Department of Correctional Services. The other one is Minister of Leader, Prophet Paseka Mboro Mutsweneng. Mr. Narias Muloto, Secretary General of the Congress of Azania, and on the line will be joined by Associate Professor Lucas Manting, Project Coordinator, Prison Reform Initiative. Gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Probably let's start here. Deputy Commissioner, perhaps you can remind us as to what happened in the case of Kenny Mutsamai, who was not released early on parole.
Thank you very much, and also good afternoon to the listeners. I think it will not be correct to discuss an individual, but maybe rather discuss...
Give a general overview of what happens normally.
What are we doing normally? Now, we are dealing in terms of Mr. Doshan, alias Kenny Mutsamai, who was sentenced whilst the previous Correctional Services Act was still in place, meaning Act
number 8 of 1959.
And as and when the new act was then enacted on the 1st October 2004, there were transitional arrangements in the act to make sure that those that were under the previous regime also benefit and taking over those benefits to the new system. As the case of those who were serving life, initially they were excluded to being granted the credits to take them over to the new dispensation. But subsequently there was a High Court case in 2011 called the Van Wyk judgment, where the judge basically, in short, ruled that lifers have also the same privilege to take forward to the new dispensation the credits that they earn in terms of the old system which was phased out. Which means by then, lifers supposed to serve 20 years in the previous dispensation, then you deduct the credits from that system, which was 6 years and 8 months, to bring the consideration date to 13 years and 4 months. That was, in short, that judgment, and which were applicable on the person that you are referred to.
Mr. Monting, down in Cape Town, the commissioner here, Deputy Commissioner, makes reference to a Constitutional Court judgment regarding the Van Wyk case. Are you taught to understand that legislation cannot work retrospectively?
Yes, it was a legal issue that had to be clarified, and as Mr. Smallberger has said, there were transitional arrangements, and obviously some uncertainty arose from that, and the matter then was taken to the courts, and that has now brought clarity to it. One must also bear in mind that those people who were sentenced under the previous dispensation, they are increasingly released. I'm not too sure about how many of them are still in custody.
Mr. Moloto, quickly and briefly, we have heard in the past that operatives were involved in what was considered by authorities to be criminal activities in a bid to raise funds for liberation movement. Was this really the case?
Yes, this is the case. As PSC, we do not believe that this particular parole legislation is applicable, because these are freedom fighters. They are not supposed to have been still incarcerated. Members of different political organizations were held under almost the same laws. They were all released because they are political prisoners.
My question is, it is in the charge sheet says Mr. Kenny Mutsamai was arrested for criminal activity, having killed a policeman in a robbery. Is this the case that they were raising funds for?
Every political prisoner was charged for criminal activity. If you go to Nelson Mandela, was charged for, at that time, there's nothing that was defined in our law which defined a political prisoner. The only person who was sentenced by Parliament was a real political prisoner, was Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe. The rest of the people were criminals insofar as the law of this country is concerned.
You're making reference to the Sobukwe clause.
To the Sobukwe clause, because he was sentenced by Parliament. The rest, everybody who was sentenced to Robben Island and so on, there was a law within which the very same context. Now, why Kenny and other APLA political prisoners? Because it was not just them, it was also combatants of other liberation movement were released as political prisoners. And we maintain that the political prisoners are not supposed to be subjected to these laws. They are supposed to be released unconditionally. Let me go back to something Deputy Commissioner Smallberger raised, the fact that the 1959 Act was then changed, the number 8 of 1959, and all political prisoners fell under the new dispensation. One of the things I am asking myself, if politicians, for instance, I made an example earlier when we were off air. That example was immediately after Pistorius was charged and sentenced, people were already saying after so many years he will come out. Why was this not the case in the case of people like Kenny Mutsamai?
I appreciate that question. I think we need to keep a few principles in mind. As correctional services, we execute and enforce the warrants that we receive issued by courts. the example that you are citing of Oscar Pistorius, he was sentenced in terms of Section 2716I of the Criminal Procedure Act. Now, if you read that specific section, read that with the Correctional Services Act, it's clear that after serving 1/6 of your sentence, you can be placed out under probation or community correction system. And in terms of the other cases, there are minimum detention periods determined in law. If you have been sentenced for example, for 10 years, you must serve at least a half of your sentence. Or if the judge have prescribed a non-parole period, we need to respect that, and we cannot infringe into that. In terms of lifers, as I was saying, the life sentence means exactly what it is. It is only for calculation purposes determined in the previous act as 20 years. It was just administrative arrangement. If you read the new Correctional Services Act, it's clearly indicated if you are sentenced to life imprisonment after 1 October 2004, you are supposed to serve 25 years. That is the minimum determined in terms of that act.
I just want to say, ask this question. Earlier, you made reference to the fact that probably I should ask Mr. Monting this. Mr. Monting, the question is, earlier the Deputy Commissioner said a life sentence, if a life sentence is regarded as 25 years or 20 years, why then don't we calculate the time for release on parole in that 20 years or 25 years? Besides, if people are sentenced to 2 life sentences, why 2 life? Nobody has 2 lives. Professor, are you there?
It's the way the law is written, and regardless of the number of life sentences, a person must be considered for parole after 25 years. And I must emphasize that this does not mean there's a right to release after 25 years. In fact, even if the person is released, he remains on parole for the rest of his or her life. So a life sentence is the heaviest sentence that can be imposed, but in our law, and it's a positive trait, there is no such thing as life without parole. There is always the possibility that a person may be released.
Thank you very much, Pastor Mboro. The question I want to ask you is, as a religious community, what does a religious community do to help inmates reintegrate into society?
No, what we do is to bring the message of hope through the Word of God, and also assist them, because after they've been released, they need to be integrated into the communities, and people don't want to associate with them, don't trust them. So we take them in that process. Like in this case of Ndate Mutsamai, was to engage with him in the Word and the new lifestyle outside, how he can contribute positively, and we find ways of what can he do in terms of business.
We'll come to that, Pastor Mboro. If you'd like to join us in today's discussion, please, you can call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498. Alternatively, you can tweet us at Recourse or email your thoughts about this program and many other programs that would wish us to cover here on Right and Recourse. Stay with us.
Africa becomes the new business frontier, bursting with opportunity and hope. With its rich natural resources and continental diversity, 11 million managers require development of executive management and business skills to unlock Africa's potential. Mancosa graduates have been driving business, entrepreneurship and innovation in Africa and the world. Mancosa. Dream it. We'll take you there.
Welcome back as we discuss correctional supervision and parole in South Africa, and especially with regard to the case of Ndade Kenny Mutsamai. Mr. Mloto, one of the issues I came across in my research on this show is that the PAC did not recognize the Truth and Reconciliation process. Why?
Look, despite the fact that the PAC has serious reservations about it, the High Command of APLA did make a submission in PE to the Reconciliation Commission. Now, and it was our understanding that it is on the presentation of the High Command and of the PAC that covers all the competence of the PAC. How some of the competence and the freedom fighters happen to still be incarcerated is still a surprise, we don't know. Now, we have gone through different administrations, made presentations to the presidents of this country, almost all of them, and we are surprised. We still maintain that these people are not supposed to be subject to these laws that we are talking about.
But what I wanted to talk about is apparently that I did appear before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for amnesty, and that was refused.
Yes. Yeah, look, these are the things which we had serious reservations on. Because if a person is a member of a political organization that is fighting a liberation movement, which it was not a secret that PAC had an armed wing and it has competence. And for that reason, there's no need for us or for the PAC or for the individual, but the manner in which the Truth and Reconciliation was run. We have had the reservations, and the case of Comrade Kenny Mutsamai is an example of the reservation that we have had. It's not only Kenny. We have other combatants that are rotting in prison that have never seen freedom, and we are talking about the trained cadres of APLA, and we have a serious problem about that because they don't deserve to be in prison as we are talking to you now.
Well, we'll address that issue in another program, which I think we should follow up on and discuss this issue of why we still have political prisoners in jail. Mr. Munting, I don't know whether you're still there. One of the issues, probably the Deputy Commissioner can also weigh in on this question. There's case law, and if I'm wrong, that the case law is that the judicial officers cannot prescribe to correctional services as to when parole should be considered, because this is a discretion of the Department of Correctional Services. In other words, we normally find judges and magistrates saying a person should not be given parole until he has finished so many years. Is that true? Can you help us there?
Yes, the law, as Mrs. Smallberg has already mentioned, the law prescribes certain minimum non-parole periods. As in Section 276(1)(I), it's 1.6, but generally the rule of thumb is the person must have half their sentence, and then there are the lifers that we've already spoken about. Now, there was a decision from the Supreme Court of Appeal a few years ago, and the Supreme Court of Appeal essentially said that it does not encourage judges to prescribe minimum non-parole periods, and that essentially correctional services should regard such remarks more as advice or as a recommendation, and that it is not a strictly binding decision from the trial court. So yes, and the court motivated this because of the doctrine of separation of powers, where there are the judiciary and the executive, and that the judiciary has limited powers over how the executive implements court orders. It leaves it to the discretion of correctional services to determine after the non-parole period when will be a suitable time to place this person out on parole.
Deputy Commissioner, I don't know whether you want to weigh in there and add to what Professor Munting was saying.
The Prof is correct in what he's saying about the judgment, But the current law, in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act, there's still sections that make provision that the presiding officer can determine a non-parole period. So as the law stands today, it's still possible. And we in Correctional Services, our Act is also making reference to that provision, that there's a non-parole period that need to be observed. And in terms of the Correctional Services Act, as he was saying, there's basically a determinate sentence is a half, and then you find the 2761Is where there's a different period determined, and life after 2004 becomes now a consideration date of 25 years. Maybe also let me just take a step back what you asked previously about political prisoners vis-a-vis criminal offenders. In terms of correctional services, we don't have any determination about whether it's a political prison or not. In terms of the process that you ask, the TRC was established in 1996. That process was applied, and in our system by then, numerous people received a special remission of pardon, which were released, and then in 2007, the then President Thabo Mbeki also announced what they called a special dispensation. Also those who still claim that they are political prisoners, and that matter is being dealt with by the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. And as and when we receive any directives from, the presidency or the Department of Justice, we as Correctional Services, we ensure that we enforce the warrants of detention, or if there's any pardon given, we ensure also that we implement that.
The other question I wanted to ask is a very interesting question. Probably you can weigh in, gentlemen, if you want to. It's, is parole a right or a privilege?
If I may go first, what is a right is not parole, but any person who is incarcerated do have the right to be considered for parole. So, to be considered and to be placed eventually on parole, I think is two different things. And from a incentive basis, I think the system in South Africa, as well as in numerous countries internationally also, parole is not in isolation. Parole is part of your rehabilitation process, because if you are admitted in a correctional facility and we determine your educational, spiritual well-being, all those needs, what we put in a correctional sentence plan, need to be responded to positively by the offender, so that the offender is aware that eventually when I reach this minimum period, I will be then in a position to be considered. And also, it's almost a carrot and stick principle, that you behave in a correctional facility because there are rules, and if you are behaving, that will also assist you to be considered positively and convince the parole board, or in terms of lifers, the Minister of Correctional Services, to take a decision in that regard.
Look, we have a number of political prisoners other than Comrade Mutsamai, who were not necessarily sentenced to life imprisonment. It is our understanding that if the Department of Correctional Services mandate is not to condemn people, is to rehabilitate people. Let's assume that these people are being corrected, they are being trained for a number of years. Clearly, these people who have been there for more than 20 years, they should be ready to be integrated in society. Now, unless the Correctional Service does not have faith in its own ability to train, because people, when they are there, they are being trained, they are supposed to be prepared to be integrated, not be kept there as if they will remain there forever and ever. And now, we have been made to understand, we don't know whether it's just a PR exercise, that the offenders are being taken through a number of training programs, and so that they are being prepared to play part in the society. Now, Kenyans spent more than 25 years in the correctional services, more than 28 years. Clearly, are they not convinced, even if you use that particular route, that they have rehabilitated him enough, that he now supposed to be acquiring skills that could be able to come and contribute into the society? These are the questions. It's also not clear as to what do they consider. What are the considerations? Now, why are they not public, so that we can see? For instance, we are not sure at this stage that after having Kenny for almost 28 years, Are they not convinced that he's now supposed to be standing on its own and begin to contribute to the society and rebuild the social life?
Let us hear the Prof's view on this thing. Prof, is parole a right or a privilege?
Well, I agree with Mr. Smallberger's description is that a person has a right to be considered. That, I think, is now very well established in our law and case law. I think we must also acknowledge that parole is an important tool for prison managers. It is an incentive for encouraging good behavior, but it can simultaneously be used as a punishment for poor behavior. I think the issue that one may need to look at more carefully is when a decision is made to refuse parole, that decision must be rational and not arbitrary. A parole board can't just refuse parole because they don't like the person or for whatever arbitrary reason. There must be good evidence upon which that decision is based.
Thank you, Prof. We'll come down. We'll come to some of the things you are raising. Prophet Moro, somebody was telling me yesterday when I was doing research on this issue. Somebody was telling me when God tried Cain and Abel in the Cain and Abel story, He put the one of the brothers who did the wrong to kill the other brother on parole. He didn't arrest him. He said, "Go away."
Yeah, God gives people a second chance because as long as a person is alive, there is still hope. The reason why Jesus died, He died for our sins, He died for our transformation, and only in God our lives can be changed. So correctional services, their mandate is to rehabilitate and correct. When the person goes out, they still need to be that support outside, people like churches, prophets like me and the rest of us, to bring that person to God, and also the communities. That person must get to the point where they to realize that I was wrong in this and that, and I need to make peace with the people I've wronged. I need to show the people, give back to the people to say, yes, my life has changed. Those who are still doing the wrong things can learn from me that you cannot be that way and be helped to live a normal life. But if a person is always reminded and is always having that stigma, what's the point of them being released? Because we are going to make them worse, and they will repeat those things and go back.
The correctional services also sometimes have what we call chaplains. What are the chaplains there for? Are they not there to help rehabilitate inmates, or are they there to help the warders to do their work?
Yes, indeed. Correctional services do have full-time chaplains, and we also have almost 2,000 community chaplains who are assisting. We are having numerous programs presented to offenders by our own chaplains or in collaboration with community chaplains. And it's also important, as the Prophet was saying, that every person need to be assisted and supported, because whatever religion you belong to, we allow that. It's not only Christian faith, all the other faiths, whether you're Muslim, you are whatever, we allow that because we regard that as part of the rehabilitation program. And we know that, if you look at in all researches, there's a very high number of people in South Africa who claim that they are Christians, which is almost more than 70%, and we also need to provide that support and assistance. And there's very good results that we are obtaining from those interventions. Remember, that's just one part of the intervention. We still have also psychologists, social workers, as well as people who are presenting correctional programs. So in a holistic approach, you can't exclude the churches from the rehabilitation of people where you're giving them a second chance.
I will allow some of you to take over, but I just want to get these out of the way. Deputy Commissioner, what is the difference between parole placement and placement under correctional supervision?
The difference is almost a little bit technical, but parole is normally given by the parole boards as a alternative when you have served your minimum detention period and you're convinced that you can serve the rest of your sentence in the community under strict conditions, where the supervision and probation part is more where there is coupled with community service that you need to render those services, and the current laws make provision that the courts can also put you directly from court as a non-custodial sentence to our community correction system, where those are, for example, doing certain hours as a community service, and even, you know,
just explain to me. There is a case in Limpopo, and there's also the Eugene de Kock case, who was sentenced to 212 years. And the one case in Limpopo, the person was sentenced to 275 years. How do you spend 275? That's a Methuselah sentence.
Yeah,
it's similar to the question I asked earlier. A person has one life. Yeah. Why do you sentence him to 2 lives, to life sentences?
Yeah, from correctional services side, we will never criticize the presiding officer who have given those sentences.
Don't say criticize the presiding officer. What we are saying, how do you serve 275 years?
Yeah, if you allow me, I'll then explain by saying that you'll normally found that those people have multiple crimes against them. So they will given a specific sentence for each and individual crime committed. But the Correctional Services Act, as it stands currently, irrespective whether you're doing 1,000 years or 500 years, after completion of 25 years, you are considered for possible placement on parole. Because, as Professor Munding was also saying, we do have a parole system, and the parole system is really to guide persons to have a smooth integration in society, and we believe that parole is working, because if you also look at the Correctional Services annual report, you will find that almost 97% of those placed under parole comply with their conditions, and the revocation is a very small percentage. So we are saying that the parolees and probationers are complying, and it's assisting the smooth integration into society after serving a determinate sentence inside the correctional facility.
Yeah. Mr. Mloto.
Yeah, look, that is not our experience, and that's why we maintain that these examples that are being given are not applicable to political prisoners. Now, people who have been gradually released and are contained in their own houses and are very strict. They are not able. How to integrate hope, to integrate a person in a society by over-restricting him? This, you see, these trained people are not ordinary people. They can use arms of war. They are capable of trying to go and make life out of themselves. Now, if you do not ensure, like what the Prophet has just told us, that they are trying to rehabilitate him, the Correctional Services realizes and recognizes the fact that we are in a Christian country. But like the Chamtel that he's talking about, we have never seen him. I mean, Comrade Kenny has been released from, was expected to leave the correctional services to his home almost every day at his own cost. I mean, how do you encourage him? Yes, if you have to find this way, you have creativity, you will commit another crime. So I don't think that those particular codes, they're in the book, they're talking about those, they're not tactical.
Let's hear a view on this from Professor Monting. Professor Monting, do you have a view on this, what the Deputy Commissioner was talking about?
The Deputy Commissioner is correct in that the compliance rate with parole and correctional supervision is very high. But I think we have to also point out that parole as a means to reintegrate into society is about much more than just complying with the conditions of release. And my observation and research from the field indicates that very little support services are actually rendered to those on parole. And here I'm talking about things like finding employment, dealing with substance abuse, etc. And I'm of the view that correctional services can do a lot more in terms of providing support and coordinating and mobilizing community support and making existing resources accessible to parolees. And this refers to some really tough issues, such as finding employment, because we know if people are unemployed, the risk of reoffending is significantly higher. And my fear is essentially that parole has been reduced to a type of a policing function. It's just about compliance with the conditions, and we don't really know what happens after that and what the reoffending rate is after parole has been completed.
Thank you, Professor. I just want to come to something else, Deputy Commissioner, and that is, let me come to Prophet Mboro. Prophet Mboro, the Commissioner actually said to me earlier when he spoke off camera that he doesn't want to talk about the conditions of Ndate Motsamai. And one of the conditions, I seem to remember in another case, that you must have a job. And I don't think me and you are constrained by the fact that we can't talk about conditions.
Yeah, you see, it's there's a lot in these issues which are really, the reality is the life out there. We can talk and a lot of things. Conditions like a job. When a person is released, the way he is released, and is left to be alone, there's no job, there is no income, there is nobody they know. Other people will make relationships to say, this person is trained like this, I can use him for this and that. So it is very important that the support system, it is really big. Here we talk of a political prisoner. There are those actually we pray for us, even those who are not political prisoners. They did crimes to say, right, you are out of that spiritually. You need God. We believe there is a devil, there is God. There's an evil spirit, there's a Holy Spirit. So these evil spirits, through prayer and the word, they are being moved out of the people. The person must be changed inside. And once he's convicted by the Holy Spirit, we'll see, then they must go and speak and encourage and engage and discourage. To do all those things, the stomach becomes empty and the person needs something. So we need to look into this. How do we work together with the correctional services as churches, as people like Prophet Mboro, to say these people, instead of they are out, they mustn't go back. And those who are in there, people like Mr. Motsamai, how do we work with him?
How are you helping Mr. Motsamai?
Mr. Motsamai, I help him through the word of God, encouraging him, you know, what God requires of him and the blessings that he can find in God and so on. He believes strongly in God and in the words that we share. We are also helping him. We decided to do the car wash because at the end of the day, he must do something. Now there it was still under construction to say, let him have a car wash and Chisanyama. You know, they can buy there and do, and people buy. And with that, let people come and socialize and talk positively and get people who are in business, people who are in politics, people in the township to share ideas and ways that can and lift up their lives. Surely that car wash, we believe at least it will provide jobs for, because there are others who are prisoners also that are working there. To just encourage people to go there and wash cars there, even if your car is not too dirty, just to that dust, to encourage him to say he must do something, he must earn a living and share some words. And Father wanted to highlight with this opportunity, Mr. Motsamai, we were speaking also of reconciliation. You know, this black, white, it was right that time to kill a white person. It was correct for political things. But now, since he's out and he realizes with this belief that
the Bible says, "Thou shalt not kill,"
with what the Bible says,
black.
that's what I'm saying. With what the Bible, politically it was correct, but now with the Bible, with the faith that is in, to say now to the white people, I am apologetic. You know, the life is a life, in spite of that it was white.
I think the same is not the ones who were
black
in
is black.
Yes.
It's life. And for
Look, the
for
project Boris talking about, this is what the correctional service is supposed to be embarking upon. Because this is rehabilitation, this correcting, this integration into the society, economic activity. How do you release a person and still contain him? Because for us, these political prisoners are being released from a small prison into that, and they are turning their houses into prisons, into the big prison. Because you still control him while he's still there. And you are not doing anything to ensure that this person is embarking on economic activity, can begin to be productive in life. Now, how do you then, in this particular, Prophet Boris stated very clearly, I agree with him, that look, let's face reality. Let's not talk these theories. We hear people talk about this and that. They don't help. In real, if a political prisoner is released and is constrained with you, how are you going to begin to change his life?
Let's get the Deputy Commissioner to answer that question.
Thank you. I think firstly we need to make it clear that if it's not a prerequisite that you need to have an employment before you are released. It's obviously encouraged. And we want to use the example of the Prophet here, that we invite all communities to assist to do exactly the same, because corrections is a social responsibility. It can't be correctional services on its own. And I think this is a good example for communities to come forward and assist. Also, what we need to realize that when we release a person, irrespective of who this person are, we are dealing with communities, we are dealing with the victims, we are dealing with the individual, we are dealing with state at large. So you need to find a balance to make sure that you cater for all these areas. And when you are dealing with human behavior and individuals, it's a very complex matter, and it's not just one size fits all. And I really want also for all the communities who are looking to this program today to invite them to exactly do the same, because if each and every individual,
as the Prophet is doing,
as the Prophet, and there's also many other people who are doing wonderful.
One of the things
we have currently, just to say, we have more than 70,000 people as we are sitting here who are under the community correction system, either on parole or on probation. And many of them have work and others don't have. Therefore, we want to plead to people, come to join hands so that we can make sure that they are not coming back to correctional facilities.
I want to come back to this issue of work and probation and parole, but I want to ask you this question. Earlier off air when you arrived, we spoke about the fact that why did it take so long for Mr. Msamai to get parole? But you told us something I didn't know about Mr. Msamai. Do you mind? I hope I'm not putting you under the bus.
No, I think it's coincident that this is taking place today, because Mr. Msamai will know that today, 22 January 1991, he was first sentenced to the sentence that he received then, and we know it was 15 years, and later there was another 3 months. And unfortunately, there was this incident in 2003, September, where he escaped from custody at Leeuwkop, and some of the crimes that he was serving was whilst on the run. And obviously, when the parole board and when the ministry is considering whether to release or not, all those factors are taken in consideration. And in terms of escape or possession of any substance in a correctional facility, there's also a way that it need to be used not to encourage that, and obviously that also count against the individual who are found guilty of doing those things. So we can't just from a distance look at a case, because each and every case need to be looked on its own merit and make sure. And if a person is not released, he or she is inclined to ask what are the reasons for this, and if they are not happy with the reasons, there are a parole review board which is chaired by a judge, or if it's a life imprisonment and they're not happy with the decision, there are many of people who are going to court to make sure that the decisions are rational, and this far the Department for Correctional Services and the Ministry could really defend most of those decisions.
Now let's take this call from James from Cape Town. James, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Hello, good day, Mr. Mateza. I'm getting lost a little bit. I wanted to hear from the gentleman from the PAC that is this case being treated as a political case? Was he a political prisoner, or the court did not agree to that status of him being a political prisoner? Then at the same time, I thought maybe the correctional service, they said his bail conditions will get relaxed as time goes on. Then it is the case, let the time goes and see how far he is performing, then his conditions will be relaxed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. I don't know whether Mr. Mloti you want to answer that. I think the Deputy Commissioner did say earlier, correctional services treats all prisoners the same way, whether they are political prisoners or criminal, they have been arrested for criminal acts.
So that's the fundamental difficulties we're having with this thing. Because there's no way you can treat political prisoners as criminals. You are criminalizing our struggle. That is wrong. Fundamentally, that's wrong. PAC doesn't agree with that. That's the first thing that, hence all these things that we tend to, in a very romantic way, move away from reality. We remove our own from the cause. I mean, today we have democracy. Today we are where we are because of an armed struggle, because of other activities that took place. And all those activities, people were released. Now, why these ones? Now, if you come and treat and try to define this case of Kenya and others, who went and sacrificed, left their families to fight for the liberation of this country, and you treat them as criminals, we have a fundamental problem with that. That's why we do not necessarily agree. We can tell all these things apply to the common
I should ask the question, what is a criminal?
It's a person who acts to benefit himself, and act that he was not instructed, he was not acting for a cause. He was not a member of a political organization. That's a criminal. It's a person who done these things for no cause at all, of liberation. Now you can test, here we are facing, I mean, we are contradicting ourselves. Because you cannot say we cherish freedom and that people fought for freedom. At the same time, you treat freedom fighters as criminals. That's wrong. And all these other definitions that we are trying to give and listen, parole, and so, they're not supposed to be applicable. These people must be left, be free, and they must go and carry on with their lives.
Deputy Commissioner, are parole boards independent? In other words, can a parole board's decision stand?
Thank you. Maybe just on the question of James from Cape Town, he mentioned that after 6 months we can review Mr. Mtsamai's parole. That is indeed correct, the parole conditions. And it was also explained to Mr. Mtsamai that if you adhere to those, it can be considered, and then normally it's been relaxed, whatever your conditions, and then there is less strict conditions on you.
Because we were worried, we were hoping to have Mr. Mtsamai on the show today, and when we called him to confirm, apparently a parole officer was with him, and he took the phone, he gave it to the parole officer.
Yeah, I think we need to also appreciate that there's different levels of parole. As in the instance of Mr. Mtsamai, where he was incarcerated for a number of years, and legislation make provision for what we call day parole, to assist what normal in legal terms they will refer to institutionalization, to make sure that you ease that into society. Therefore that system is there. And when you been placed on parole, especially those who are serving life and long sentences, you have then either house detention, electronic monitoring as a condition, you are restricted to certain managerial restrictions. You can also be restricted your movements, and that is not to make it impossible for the individual to, ease into society. But that's what I was saying. You need also to manage the risk, not only from the individual, but to find that balance that I referred to earlier on.
You haven't answered my questions about the independence of the parole boards.
The parole boards, we have currently 52 parole boards, and their decisions are independently. If you are not in agreement with the decisions, there is a parole review board, and they are taking decisions of all people serving determinate sentences more than 2 years up and until whatever the period. The Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, in terms of the current legislation, have the jurisdiction to decide upon the release of those who are serving life. And in terms of those who are serving life, parole boards are making a recommendation to the Minister, and the Minister have a National Council on Correctional Services who looking at all those cases and then advise him in terms of appropriateness of release, or are there still other programs that he or she need to undergo.
Mr. Moloto, you wanted to weigh in on something?
Yes, look, we haven't heard of any practical assistance the Deputy Commissioner is talking about that is in place. What we know is that we have made as a party took great effort to try to help Kenny Mutsamai to find a house, a home. They don't care. I mean, after 28 years in prison, what kind of a dwelling, a shelter do you think he's going to find?
I'm told as a former freedom fighter, Mr. Kenny Mutsamai is entitled to a house like all others.
Yeah, you can ask the department whether they've provided him. Now, it takes effort like Prophet Mboro, the PAC, and obviously other community leaders to try to, we are making this effort. Now, in trying to assist further, we are being obstructed by all the chips and other things, that the restrictions that are there. And we are being told to assisting. What can you put on the table as a program of assistance? You don't, I mean, you do not assist a person by restricting him from go to search for opportunities. Yeah? Now, when you say this person is restricted from getting into certain district and so on and so forth, while you expect him to make a living, how is he going to make a living? For us,
Prophet, let me ask the Prophet here. Amongst the conditions, is Ndade Kenny Mutsamai allowed to come to church?
He is allowed to come to church, as far as I heard. I don't know with the Deputy Minister. These conditions, for me, there are some places where it's going to affect. We'll see how we do, because the programs we had was, since he can't speak to the media, was to have programs with him of reconciliation, of motivating and building others, because he has to still work, and change people's lives. And his voice, we're expecting it, and those families of, even if they are dead or they are alive, just to have a way of reconciliation, because we are in Christ, and this is a new life. It was, as I said, as it was right that time, but according to the word of God, it is wrong to take any life. There's a racism right now in the farms, everywhere. So I see his beliefs that time and what is happening with those racists who are still here, who says a black life is not a life. Those who are saying a white life is not a life. So to try and say, now let us hold hands and bring change in each other's lives and work together for a better life.
Mr. Moloto, Mr. Mutsamai has indicated that he would like to see the different factions of the PAC come together. Are you going to allow him the space to assist in regard to achieve this?
Look, Kenny Mutsamai is a cadre, senior cadre of the PAC. PAC is an organization with leadership, with structures. It has programs. Kenny knows that he has to play a role in the PAC as a member of the PAC. There are structures, so he's working from my office, so he'll be directed from time to time.
Does the tag allow you to go to office?
It's part of, yes. No, I do have, you do visit my office from time to time.
Does the tag allow you to go to office?
Although the tag from time to time tell him it's enough, go out, go out. So there are those difficulties, challenges. But as PAC, we have really made effort to try to contribute to integrate him back into the society, work with him. We have these challenges, of course, of the conditions that we don't like. We hate them because they are not human. And but yeah, as such, he will obviously, we hope to make progress with him.
Deputy Commissioner, final word from you. You can talk as much as you want for about 1 minute or 2 minutes if you want to.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's very important what is being discussed here. And each and every parolier do have a probation or a parole officer, and they do have certain discretion, and those conditions are not to make it impossible, but is more to manage and control the situation. So if there are specific needs, they need just to liaise with the parole officer, and he or she need to assist, and I think if they can't assist, there need to be reasons to be provided for that.
Earlier, you made mention of the fact that you make use of religious people to help prisoners. Are you going to take the challenge that Prophet Boro has given you, that he's available?
Yeah, he's more than welcome that we take hands. And let me also just make one small comment after Prof. Menting also said that community corrections or parole is more a policing exercise. We do have many programs that are running by social workers, by religious people that, they still continue, because rehabilitation don't have a start and a real end date. We need to assist and support those who are on parole up and until they are out of our system, and hope the community will take them and continue with the process.
Deputy Commissioner Smallberger, Mr. Narius Moloto, Prophet Boro, and Professor Munting down in Cape Town, thank you very much for your time. This has been a very good learning curve for me and many other people. The views expressed on this show don't necessarily reflect those of the SABC or Rights and Recourse. This program is repeated at 5 on Wednesday morning. You can also find us on YouTube. From me and the rest of the crew, goodbye.